One question that comes up very, very often is how do you event model traditional systems? If you want to understand how your system works, you need to start with the data that flows through your system. It doesn't matter if it's a classical system, if it's an event source system, the data always tells you what is actually happening. And the data in a classical system typically is stored in relational tables, in document tables, whatever systems you use for your persistence. So what you can do is, if you want to model these systems, just start with the data. So you can just say, okay, I want to place a few tables here. Let's say we use the table, that's the customer table. And let's just copy one more. That's the address table, for example. Addresses. Now we can define the schema for our tables. Let's say we have the name, we have the surname, of course. We have an email, and we have something like the customer ID here. So we can just save this, and we can have a look at our table here just to see how it looks like. That's basically our customers table. We can do the same for the address table. Here we have something like the street, house number, city, and zip code. Let's have a quick look. That looks fine. So why is that important? Now, the first question you should ask is, okay, now since we have these tables, how does the data get into these tables? What needs to happen for a new customer to get stored? So let's say we have an event which describes basically something that happened in our system, which is called customer registered. A customer gets stored into our customers table if the customer is registered. We can combine these tables, and of course it will be red. That's the information completeness check, as the system doesn't know where this data for all these columns in our customer table is coming from, since we did not define any fields in our customer registered event. Now let's just copy over the fields here. Let's say this is exactly what we store in the system: the name, the surname, the email, and our customer ID. We could also say the customer ID here is an ID attribute. All right? So, but what needs to happen for this event to be stored? We could define a state change slice, which is a write operation in our system. How does that work? So if this command gets executed, from the UI, we see this action here and the event will be stored. Now we can just propagate the events all the way up here, and of course, all the way up here to the UI. So now we have our operation here. We have this event that gets stored. In our traditional system, this is the same thing as the data that gets stored in our customers table. At the same time, though, we also store the data in our system here. So the customer registered also contains the address data. So let's add the street here, the zip code, the city, and what was it? The house number. Because in the same operation, we also store this information. So we will connect this table here. Now, if we want to look at this, we can, because here we see that's the overview. We have our customers table, we have our addresses table, and we see exactly from which events the data gets stored into these tables. Why is that important? Because now we can analyze how the data flows through our system. Let's say there is a second thing that happens in our system. So here the information completeness check, of course. Let's just copy over everything again. Makes it much more simple. And here we do the same. Just copy over the fields. Now let's say we have a second operation, which basically allows us to move a customer. So the event here would be customer moved. And of course, we have the same fields here. We have the street, house number, zip code, and the city, right? Now, what happens if this event gets stored? We have the same table again. Because then what happens is we update our addresses table, right? So let's define our state. Let's define our state change slice, the write operation in our system. And of course, this gets triggered from this UI here. Decent. Now, the interesting thing is, if we look at the data flow now in our details view, you will see that we now have two events, two workflows updating the same data. We have two workflows that update the same addresses table. That is very important. This allows us to find the redundancy in our system and to find the coupling, because these two workflows, they're very, very tightly coupled because they're writing to the same table. The street column here is updated from the customer registered event, from the street field, and also from the customer moved event. And we can move directly to these events here and look at them directly in the event model. This simple additional pattern allows you to really describe the current system, and it allows you to find all these redundancies in the system. Maybe that is really helpful. I hope so. That is one of the new features in the event modeling plugin, and it really, really helps. Let me know what you think of it.